All right, everybody, welcome back to Are You Being Real? And we've got an amazing guest in the house today,
Woo!
the one and only Amber Ray. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Amber, you've been on my radar for a number of years. I think when I started the podcast, I'd seen you either be interviewed on other podcasts or people were asking me if I knew you. So you've been kind of in my sphere for a long time. And your name just keeps popping up and up and up. And then we connected on social media. And here we are today. So very excited to get to know you. And you've got a new book coming out, your first book.
Yes.
Choose Wonder Over Worry. So stoked to have you here on the show. And I want to drop right in. And since this show is all about being real,
I love it.
I wanted to have you take us back. And we'll start off the show with you taking us back to a moment in your life where you felt like your authenticity was really being tested, like a really perhaps dark moment or a rock bottom crossroads in your life where your authenticity and being true to who you are was really challenged, or maybe it was an opportunity where you discovered who you are. So I'd love to have take you right into that intense moment, like the start of a movie, and for us to see what happened.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'm going to share a story that I haven't really shared before.
Ooh.
And I think I was 22 years old, and I had walked into a pharmacy with a fake prescription for Adderall, which I had been forging at this point for months.
Wow.
And it was a different pharmacy than the one where I had basically manipulated the pharmacist. And I went into a new one and I hand the pharmacist the prescription. I'm in a rush because a friend's waiting for me. And I say, I need this really quickly. And the pharmacist noticed that something was slightly suspicious. And about 3 minutes later, he comes back and he says, this is a fake prescription. I've called the cops. Stay right there.
Oh my God.
And everything inside of me, I didn't know if I should run. I didn't know if I should, what I should do in that moment, but I just froze, and a panic washed through me, and all of these bad choices that I had made for months, because I knew every time it was like a checkbox of did it again, did it again, did it again. This thing is not serving you. Why are you doing this? And I knew I was harming myself and through this addiction, which at one point a psychologist had written me a prescription, and then it had expired. I had moved states, and I'd basically copied that prescription and began forging it. And so the pharmacist comes back. I'm waiting. I think the cops are coming. I think my future's over. I think I'm going to jail. I think I'm going to get in trouble for prescription fraud. All these thoughts are going through my mind, in addition to all of the shame I felt for not facing myself. And the pharmacist comes back and he says, I spoke to your doctor, and he actually asked me not to call the cops, and he's going to deal with it from here.
Wow.
And I was shocked because I thought they were already on their way. I would imagine them handcuffing me. I imagined myself calling my mom, at the prison or whatever it is. I don't even know. And, it was a huge wake up call for me. And even though I didn't go to jail, what I realized is that I'd been putting myself in a jail all along through that addiction and through the story I was telling myself that I wasn't good enough or worthy, and I needed to be thin, or I needed to accomplish more, and this super drug was going to help me get there. And so that was really the moment when I realized I can't keep on with this. I must face what's here to face.
Wow. Thank you so much for opening up in such great and suspenseful detail. And pretty cool that the pharmacist called your doctor and not the cops. But it's kind of funny because I can imagine being in your shoes so terrified.
Yeah.
It's not like you killed someone.
Yeah.
You're just buying a prescription that you had faked, the signature on. So it's just amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Curious, because my guess is that your life, on paper, probably looked really good at that time. Guessing you had a really great job, and you still found yourself doing this. I can also imagine that you probably could have gone and seen any doctor, and a doctor would have given you a prescription for Adderall. So it wasn't like you were doing it because no doctor would, prescribe you this. Yeah. So I'm curious to know kind of what the rest of the picture looked like if you went up one level macro wise.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I was, working my first job out of college. I was, on paper crushing it. I was, working with some of the biggest brands in the world on their global marketing campaigns and on this trajectory of success. I think I had very recently broken up with my college boyfriend, which completely shattered me. And I had this very warped story around relationships and men, where if I need to be a certain way in order to be loved, I had lost my father when I was young, which actually speaks to the addiction piece, because it was his own addiction and him not facing himself that led him to get to behind the wheel under the influence and kill his best friend, and which eventually led to his death. And so this moment when I was 22, standing in that pharmacy, it clicked for me of, whoa, I'm repeating the pattern of my father, and it's time for me to change this. And I had vowed when he did pass away, when I was 12 years old, I had vowed that I would not follow in his footsteps, and that I would, like, the notion for me is he was this brilliant artist and businessman, and he was so talented, but just never, he was like misguided, misdirected. And I had this sense that I didn't want to die with my gift still inside as he did. And it was this moment, when I was standing there, I realized, whoa, I'm dying with my gift still inside. I'm not facing myself. I'm ignoring, I'm numbing. And so I think, the general theme was, even though I was so successful and doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, I was empty on the inside. And rather than turn toward these uncomfortable feelings that I didn't know how to navigate, I just numbed them by twisting off a cap and popping a pill in my mouth.
And why didn't you go to a doctor to
I
get
have
a new
no
prescription?
idea. When you asked that question, I was like, that's a really logical.
Because I think a lot of us, have found ourselves in that situation, and there's some flavor of that in our daily lives, where it's like, it would take 2 seconds to go do something. Like, I have an example, like a piece broke off of my bike a couple days ago, and like I could just go to the place where I bought the bike and get a new piece. It's like literally like a screw. They probably wouldn't even charge me for it, but it would take me the time to go and do it. So like I've been risking riding around on this bike, where if like that piece like shifts out of place, like I could get hurt like really badly. But like I still like haven't gone to the repair shop to do it. So I'm just curious to hear like kind of what your logic was.
I've actually never thought of that until this moment, why I didn't. But when I like tune into it, I think for whatever reason, either it seemed easier to just break the law, I don't know, or it, I imagine there was some shame around what I was doing, the fact that I was taking it, and having to go meet with the person and face them face to face would have had me have to look at a feeling I wasn't addressing. And if I was to meet with a psychologist, they're going to ask me a bunch of questions. They're going to want to know where I'm at. And I think I was avoiding myself. And so that was another way of avoiding myself. It was easier to just scribble and go do something, which, it's...
Gotcha. And after that awareness, after that incident, what happened next? You had this awareness, you made this decision that you weren't going to perpetuate this past pattern that perhaps that you had, gotten from your dad. How did that go? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So I wish I could say that it was this like overnight transformation.
It wasn't? What?
But it wasn't that at all. It was a slow shift. I feel like the biggest thing I did start doing was I started journaling, and I had been writing since I was a kid, and I had gotten out of touch with writing. And writing for me, like even after my father passed, was a vehicle for me to face my grief and to turn toward and understand everything that was swirling around inside of me, and to give it a name and a voice. And so I began that practice again. And I think, writing in a way, I hate to say it saved me, but it brought me home to myself. And so I started writing. I just started, I had all of this grief around the relationship ending and, what that meant around my lovability, which again, the guy I was dating was just a mirror for the wound around my father. And there was a lot there for me to really turn toward and process. And I very slowly started chipping away at that. And so while things didn't change outside of me immediately, I began to really tune inward and see what was there, what needed to be heard, and to voice the achy parts of me.
I'm curious as to kind of how that continued to evolve in discovering who you are and ultimately leaving that work to now be such a positive force and impact in other people's lives.
Yeah, I think the biggest, I didn't know this then, but my focus on the inward journey is what catapulted my outward journey. And so as I began to journal more, write more, sort of, it was like I was writing my way into truth, my own truth. And as I did that, things that were out of alignment externally began to shift. So it was like once I had processed the relationship, I realized that the men I was attracting and actually seeking out were not, the right fit for me. And so that started to shift. I started to realize that the job I had, which was amazing and I loved it, it was more about achievement and approval and validation than it actually being something that lit me up. And so this is when these big questions started ruminating inside of me of who am I? Why am I here? What are my gifts? I had no idea who I was, but I knew that I wanted to step onto a journey to uncover who I am and what I'm here to give and do and who I'm here to be. And so that's when I ultimately, I think it was like 9 months later, I felt this pull to San Francisco. And I had tweeted, I want to move to San Francisco. And then I was afraid and I deleted it because I thought a colleague or my boss might see. And in that 10 minutes, a director of marketing of a software company in San Francisco reached out and said, the CEO of a software company in San Francisco reached out and said, hey, we're hiring a director of marketing. Might that be you? And for me, Chicago was familiar with everything I knew. It was everyone I knew from college. And I really feel like I needed this fresh start and this space to step away from everything familiar and to enter unfamiliar territory so I could really, see what was possible for myself. And so I ended up moving to San Francisco, and that was really, that was one step where I was choosing myself and I was choosing the unknown and open to, I felt like I was living for the questions of who am I and why am I here, and creating the space to allow the answers to emerge.
And I imagine that that's a question that never stops and continues to evolve and is a moving target, right?
100%.
And that ultimately has led you to New York, and you're going to be a published author for the first time as well.
Yeah.
So kind of like where you are today, would love to hear you, tell us a little bit about where the idea for your new book came from, and just the most important things that we should be aware about that can support us in our daily lives.
Yeah. So to close the gap a little bit between, so that was like nearly 10 years ago.
Oh, it was? Okay.
To today. So that for 10 years, basically have been on this journey. And as I began to turn inward more, whether it was meeting with psychotherapists or meeting neuroscientists or mystics, healers, artists, authors, I began really seeking out perspectives that would help me connect with my own voice of truth and help me look at these. I realized along the way, and this gets to what the book is about, but I realized along the way that I had this sort of invisible, terrible someone, which is what Cheryl Strayed calls it. I had this voice inside my head always shouting mean things at me, like, you're not good enough to do that. Who are you? You're not thin enough or powerful enough if you don't do this. And one day I sort of looked up at like this voice and said, who are you? And the voice said, I'm worry. And I'm really anxious about what's happening. And I don't know how I feel about this. And this is like, you might get hurt and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, that's interesting. And I was like, hey, worry. Okay. Where'd you come from? And worry said, well, what do you mean? Where did I come from? But what happened is I started dialoguing with some character inside of my head.
So you created some space
between
you and that
this
part
voice.
Of you. Yeah.
And I realized, oh, okay, so I am not that voice, but this voice is actually a character inside of me, one of many characters that I can talk to, dialogue with, and actually turn toward. Yeah. And so this really like began my practice, I'd say over the last 5 years, where I started to realize I had all these inner characters. And so once I began because for a long time I was like, worry, you suck, go away, I hate you. Yeah. You make my life miserable. But, I feel like when I would push away, it would only increase in size. And so the practice for me began being, okay, like, I understand that you're a little concerned about this. Like, tell me what's up. And like, I would turn to a friend if they were hurting or anxious or scared or fearful. I'd be like, hey, what's going on? Talk to me. So I began talking to this voice. And then one day when I was in an art gallery, and I, at this point, had started to make art and play with art. And I walked into this art gallery and there was mixed media art lining the walls. And I had this like goosebump sensation down my body. And another voice inside my head said, it's time to make some art. And I was like, ooh, who are you? And she was like, I'm Wonder. And I was like, oh, I like you. And then, of course, Worry chimed in and said, art? Who the hell are you to make art? You didn't go to art school. And I was like, okay, that's Worry speaking now. And it began this journey of naming these various parts of myself. And Wonder, of course, said, well, there's a person who runs this gallery. Ask them if they, teach workshops, like make art with them. And I began following this call of Wonder. And as I started talking to and being in conversation with Wonder led me to meet and turn toward all these other parts of myself, whether it was shame or anxiety or imposter syndrome or anger, and get curious about what these emotions were trying to teach me, rather than as the breakdown moment I shared around Adderall, because I was numbing all of my messy feelings. Now I'm getting curious about them, and I'm beginning to integrate all these aspects of myself that I had previously denied. And that really, that's what it for me was around this journey of choosing wonder over worry. And it was like all of a sudden my life, it was like went from chaos to alignment. And I had these multiple personalities that I was creating order around. And a sense of like, as I, allowed, instead of, I feel like women, especially, anger is bad. Don't be angry. Don't ruffle any feathers. Don't shake anything up. And instead I saw like anger is actually my loyal friend telling me a boundary has been crossed. This is not okay. And I'm just gonna very loudly create a warning signal for you. And as I would say, okay, anger, I hear you. What is it that you want me to know? What's going on? What boundary has been crossed? Anger had very important information to give me. And so what this book really is about is not only meeting worry and wonder, but it's using wonder to turn toward our emotional world and get to know all these aspects of ourselves that we live in a society that wants us to numb and push away and not turn toward. When really how we embrace and access the wholeness of who we are is by turning and inviting in all our various parts.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think it's really interesting kind of naming these characters, because then I'm guessing you don't over-identify with them.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge that I know a lot of us face is we'll get fixated on some idea or belief. Maybe it's, I'm not good enough, or I'm not ready, or I've already got too much on my plate, or, I've got to deal with all these major circumstances that feel like a mountain to climb before I want to actually do what I want. But I definitely find that the reality is there's so many messages being forced at us all the time, whether from, the news or whether from pop culture or the people around us, that if we're not really checking in with ourselves, then we're chasing all these targets that are artificial, that other people have said, you want this, when that might be very far from the case. Mm-hmm. So I love the work that you're doing, because I think it's so important. And I also really like this lens that you've built in terms of you can choose your worry, you can choose your wonder. And I think it's a really nice polarity in the decision-making process. And I also think it's cool because one could also say, well, isn't that the same thing as choosing love versus fear, good versus evil? But worry and stress and anxiety is something very specific and real for probably most of us. If you're listening to this and breathing, you probably experience that. And then wonder is exciting. And so to me, it's in a way, it feels a little bit more specific and emotional than saying love or fear. Like it feels like a little bit like, I don't know, it's easier in a way to attach onto and to like see how exactly, where in my life what am I worried about? Worried about my love life. I'm worried about my health. I'm worried about, worried about my relationships, and like the wonder and like playing with that.
Yeah. And that's where, wonder, like so I'm worried about relationships, wonder would say, where is that coming from? What is the worry? And it's not like, I think an important distinction. I'm not saying push away the negative and only embrace the positive, because I actually think that we live in also a society that tends to emphasize positivity to a point that's detrimental. Yeah. And so it's more of getting curious about the like if you're telling yourself I'm not good enough, like where did I learn that? Who like, was it like a moment in third grade where someone said you're not good enough to do that? Like if we can get to the root of the stories that we've created or inherited, we can then begin to shift the narrative. Totally.
I love it as we live in 2018 and like we think, oh, the world is going to end, there's school shootings and which are obviously terrible. But for the most part, like the level and amount of violence in the world is way less than it's ever been in the history of human beings. And the reason why we feel that emotional fear, that fight or flight, is because literally our ancestors, going way, way back, like didn't know if they were going to see the light of the next day because their village, could be pummeled, or there could be droughts where there's no food for years. So like that's why we have that feeling. Yeah. It just in today's day and age, like most of us are going to be fortunate enough to, to be able to have a meal, or, worst case scenario, even if maybe you're out of money, there's somebody else who could, take you in for a couple of days or give you food. Like it's not quite as dire as sometimes it feels. But the reason why we have that fight or flight is a stat that I saw, I think on your website, is that inner voice, that 80% of what it's telling us in our head is about worry. Yeah. Which is a high percentage like of not only time, but also of like energetic bandwidth as well. Yeah. It's exhausting to be in a state of fear or worry all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 80% either regret about the past or anxiety about the future. Okay. Which is a stat I learned from Dr. James Doty. He's a neurosurgeon at Stanford. Okay. And yeah, to your point, it's that evolutionary fight or flight, will I survive, that is still in us. And that's something that I talk about in the book, and something that I think is a really useful practice is being able to distinguish between what's toxic worry and what's useful worry. Because ultimately worry is trying to protect us and keep us safe. And so first it's acknowledging like, oh, this is here to try and keep me safe. Okay, now let's distinguish, because that's my animal brain, and I can use the other aspects of my brain to say like toxic worry is those ruminating, reoccurring, ongoing thoughts, that anxiety about something that's already happened, the like fear around what might happen tomorrow that's beyond our control. And useful worry is like, maybe don't jump off that cliff because it's really high and you might not make the landing. Like worry can be useful in that way. Or if you meet someone and they say, the only reason I'm interested in having this conversation with you is because I want to take your money, worry's going to click in and be like, nah, don't probably do something with them. And so it's being able to distinguish between the two.
It brings up something I read. I don't know if it was a Fast Company article that you were featured in, or maybe Forbes, but you were talking about overcoming self-doubt. And that you said that self-doubt is a constant force in your life, but the difference now is that you're able to see it as an asset rather than a liability, and that when it's not there, you're actually worried. So I'd love to have you tell us more about that, and maybe give us like a particular instance in your life where that came up.
Yeah, I mean, I even feel like right now I have my first book coming out. I'm exhilarated and terrified. I, am putting my full heart into bringing the idea into the world. And at the same time, there's still like that voice of how will it be received? And, will people like it? And I have those doubts. The difference is that the doubt doesn't stop me from taking action. The doubt just tells me how much I care. And so I often find that if I'm afraid, if I'm doubting, if I'm worried, it's actually a signal of what is so meaningful to me and how much I care and love about something. So it just reminds me that, okay, I'm outside my comfort zone. This is meaningful to me, and, keep taking action on what's in my control, because I can have a million doubts around things that, like, I don't, some people might hate the book. That's fine. But, I guess it's the people who love it. And really, I met with Seth Godin right after I got my book deal. I worked with him years ago.
Nice.
I worked with him years ago to start a publishing company. And he said to me, Amber, you've already won. Like, you wrote the book you wanted to write. You got the deal. And I had brought my fiance with. He's like, you have your man. Like, all these pieces are in place. Like, you already won. So don't lose sight of that as you're bringing this. Don't kill yourself in the pursuit of bringing it to the world, because, you got to make the thing. And so I keep reminding myself, even as I'm feeling these doubts, like, I get to experience this feeling right now because I'm doing what I love and it scares me. I get to bring this to the world and not know what's going to happen. Like, I get to do that. And so it's been a reframe for me around just the opportunity of living.
It's so interesting. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question to that. This just piques my curiosity.
Yeah.
So, like, when you get excited about the book, what do you think about? And when you get scared about the book, what do you think about?
Yeah, when I get excited about it, I'll talk about what I'm like, what do I think when I get excited? When I get excited about in these moments of these interviews where I'm talking about it, where there's a feedback loop, where I'm in communication, because the book is such a solo journey. Like, I went to Bali for 3 months and basically went into a cave and wrote the book, and then exited, was like, okay, time to I got the book deal May of last year, and the book is coming out exactly a year later. Very fast. So I basically had 2.5 months to write the book. So I was full immersion, and then came out of it, jumped straight into, okay, now how do I bring this to the world? And there hasn't really been a feedback loop. And so for me, when I can be in conversation with people, that gets me at least feeling the energy again. And so that's when I feel full trust and surrender. Like, I've done the thing, I'm going to do my best, and let's see what happens. And then when I'm worried about the book, it's more of, am I doing enough? Has been the reoccurring worry voice for me lately. Am I doing enough? What is enough? Will people like it? Wow, I'm so vulnerable in this book. I'm sharing I feel as if the approach I decided to take was, the stories that resonate with me most are the ones in which the author is so raw that I can see myself in their story, and that's where I learn. And so I decided to take that same approach. And so I feel as if I'm standing naked before the reader, which, there's some fear about being seen, of course. And, that's when you're vulnerable and can be judged and criticized. And so, that I can go down those rabbit holes as well.
The funny thing is that you're going to be judged and criticized regardless as a human being, right? Like, we're all judged and, and criticized while trying to protect our image. But, at the end of the day, we want to feel like, we're living a purposeful life, that we're, here for a reason and providing value for other people. So I think that that's just it's just such a funny thing to me that we want to be seen so badly, or we want to be heard so badly, yet at the same time, we oftentimes don't let other people see us or hear us.
And we don't let ourselves see or hear us.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. So I read that while doing some research, and you said that sometimes the missing person from the story is you. So tell us about that concept. Yeah.
And I think, one of as someone who was often seeking the validation and approval of other people, particularly men, because I had that absence of the father figure, I realized that was a never-ending quest, and I was gonna chase and chase and chase, and there was no end in sight. And so really the journey and the work for me was around turning inward and does this feel right for me? Does this feel aligned for me? What is my truth here? And so, we're so connected in this world right now, but I feel like we can be disconnected from ourselves. And so I feel like the work is really what is the story that I ache to tell? And I was at a workshop with Cheryl Strayed and Elizabeth Gilbert. And Cheryl Strayed asked, do you tell your journal the truth? And that, hit me so hard, because where we're not telling ourselves the truth is the story to enter. And once we enter that story and tell ourselves the truth about that story, that's when I feel like so much opens up. And so that's where I feel like, we can always, and even like the world of making a difference and making impact, I often find as woundedness or ego masked as wanting to make a difference. When really, when we can tell ourselves the truth about ourselves, that's the greatest work, that we're here to do, when we wake up to that truth within ourselves.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And it brings me back to the idea of being authentic, because one could easily make the argument that anything and everything is authentic because we can justify any of our actions if we want them to, and be like, oh, well, that's just how I was, feeling in the moment. Right. Which I think is like pretty interesting. But if we're not willing to explore and, look at it from multiple angles, then how the hell are we supposed to know what the truth actually is if we're so fixated on being right about something? Mm-hmm. So did you ever see this as like the life that you were going to be living?
Yes and no. As a kid, I wanted to be editor-in-chief of a magazine, and I actually started an online magazine when I was 11 called Teen Zine. And it was at that point, I wanted to like I was annoyed at the content for girls my age, which is all around like how to look and how to please and get boys to like you. And so I wanted it to be more about confidence and, like teenage girl power was my stance back then. And so I feel like in a way, like I remember reading books, knowing I would write a book. And then it's like, that was the like amber and childlike wonder. Okay. And then I feel like I lost sight of that and went into everything I thought I was supposed to do, everything I thought I was supposed to be accepted, to belong, to fit in, all of that. And I feel like now I've come back to that. So it's almost like as a kid, I knew it was a coming home, but I also couldn't have imagined or predicted the path that I went on to like come back here, if that makes sense, come home to this moment. Because I, without a shadow of doubt can say this is the work that I'm here to do. I want to write 30 books, I want this is my life's work. And yeah, I had to come back to what my wise young self knew was my calling, but I didn't really know if I could do something with it.
Yeah, it's really cool and interesting that like you had that inkling, you had that desire, you had that fantasy, and then kind of sounds like got lost in the reality and the rat race essentially of traditional society and like what we feel like we're supposed to be as human beings, and then had to kind of unlearn that societal programming and conditioning to get back to self, and now are sharing that and supporting other people and doing the same. So totally. I find that to be incredibly inspiring, Amber. So
thank you
very much for sharing. So, all right, it is time for the truth challenge.
I like truth challenges.
All right. So I've got 5 questions that kind of coming up with on the fly for you, and you're going to have 30 seconds to answer each.
Great.
And it's your job to answer them honestly and authentically. Do you accept the challenge?
I accept.
All right. The truth challenge with the one and only Amber Ray. So question number 1 for you is I read this, I think, like in an old bio or something that you had. But you said that you believe in a world without a speed limit. So I'm curious to know, is that literal? Is it figurative? What does that mean and why?
Definitely figurative. I think speed limits, well, I don't need to go into that part. But yeah, I mean, I think I wrote that someone helped me write that 8 years ago, I think. And it was really that I was in this time of feeling so limited by the conditioning of who I was supposed to be. And so what would it look like to break free of those limits and live in alignment with what feels true for me? And so a world without a speed limit would be a world where we feel worthy to pursue that which we feel curious about, and we aren't limited by the stories we create inside of our head and the things that people tell us about who we ought to be.
Question number 2 for you. You said that earlier in your career that you were really focused on the external validation. And that's perhaps how you measured success or happiness. So what is your barometer today?
Truth and alignment. So, my biggest question always is like, what feels true for me? Does this feel aligned? And it's this, there's a pendulum. Sometimes you have to go all the way one way to go all the way the other way to find that center for yourself. But no one can tell you that this is what's true for you. It's truth is, an individual journey. And so for me, it's really been a quest of waking up to that own individual truth and living in alignment with it.
Question number 3 is our giving confessions question. And since this show is all about being real and vulnerable, you've already been pretty real and vulnerable, but also just, this is the question. So what is something that you're embarrassed to admit, perhaps you're ashamed of, or that you struggle with, that you're willing to share with listeners of the show today because it could help someone?
The first thing that's coming to mind is I recently met a new character inside of me, Ambition, and her name was Kimberly, and she was like, I'm ambition, and like there were these like explosion rocks, and she said that all she cared about was success and winning, and like nothing else mattered. And I realized like that's a real part of myself, and that's definitely the part of the ego part of me, but I had a really hard time accepting her because I didn't want that to be who I am. I was like, ooh, I don't like you, but I'm gonna learn to accept you.
Question number 4 for you. When is it most challenging to be authentic?
It's most challenging to be authentic when I am not speaking my truth. And so if I get on stage and I'm terrified and I don't acknowledge it and say, I have to be honest, like my heart's beating really fast, I have butterflies in my stomach, it stays stuck in me. And then I feel like I can't sink into myself. And so it's anytime I don't name what I'm feeling, name it to tame it, I find that I'm slightly off balance or slightly not aligned with who I am.
And question number 5, what is another fantasy or big idea, some kind of truth that you have that you've yet to birth into the world, or maybe do to the level that will feel like truly fulfilling for you?
I have this vision of, and we've just started it, it's called Wonder Circles, which are these safe spaces for people to talk about what's really going on in their lives, the anxieties and the worries as much as the curiosities and the dreams. And the dream is to have 100,000 circles, meeting once a month and creating that safe space for people, because that's where I think the dots really connect and transformation begins.
The one and only Amber Ray. Thank you so much for your honesty and sharing, as well as your super big vision. And I'm all about that, like us actually allowing ourselves to see one another, because not only is it incredibly therapeutic when we have the courage to like let go of something we're holding on to so tightly, and sharing with others, and maybe realizing that we're perhaps like overreacting or letting that run our lives, and also seeing that other people are experiencing that as well. I mean, that's the way, in my opinion, that we can really truly learn from one another, and like with that have understanding, and then with that understanding we can know how to best support one another. Because let's face it, like it's a scary world. There's some darkness that goes on here, and I think like if we're willing to kind of turn the light on and allow ourselves, to look within and to see each other, I see so much possibility there. And I know it's kind of like a big kind of like a little bit of a fluffy vision. I just it makes perfect sense to me. So
thank you.
Mad kudos to everything that you do. So as we wrap up this show, what can we do to support you?
Buy the book.
Yeah, there you go. I love that.
Get right to it. Yeah,
Good,
I mean,
yeah.
I put my heart and soul into this, and I really believe in the product. And the greatest way to spread the word is to buy the book, pass it on, give it to a friend, and join the Wonder Movement.
That was super bold and awesome. A lot of people I ask the question to, as all the listeners know, is like people dodge it. They're like, oh, one way you can support me is like being authentic and like going after what you want. We're like, no, how can we support you? Because like as humans, it's like we sometimes feel like we're a burden, and it's, we don't want to like look vulnerable, so we have trouble asking for the support that we need. But buy Amber's book. It'll not only support her, but it'll support you as well. So last question is, I want to know what your final words of wisdom and advice are, and specifically if there's any tangible tips that someone can try on at home that perhaps will keep them in best discovery of their truth or living in alignment with their truth during tough moments, whatever you feel like is the most important thing to convey.
Yeah, I know I've said this throughout as a theme, but to really drive it home, that rather than numb out or avoid the messy or uncomfortable emotions, really turn toward them and get curious about what they're trying to teach you, because they're showing up for a reason. And a practice to do that I love is I'll get out a pen and paper or a journal and I'll write at the top, hey, and like whatever the voice is. So maybe it's like, hey, anxiety about not doing enough, or hey, fear of what she'll think of me, or hey, general fear of not finding a person that I can build a life with. Whatever it is for you, whatever that reoccurring worry voice or thought or fear is, hey, whatever it is, it's me. I'm here for you. I see you. What is it that you want me to know? And that's a practice to begin to dialogue with that part of you. Because again, when we can take it from a voice that's bouncing around in our head to actually this character that we can dialogue with, it shifts the way that we relate to that part of ourselves. And often really incredible wisdom will come from that.
Amber, this has been such a pleasure getting to know you. We're excited for your book to come out, and we'll have links to everything that we've discussed on the show notes page. So Amber Ray, it's been a pleasure. The one and only Amber Ray.
Thank you. It's been great.
No more speed limits.